Now, what made the American detective series Columbo a rule-breaking television original? The crime writer Mark Billingham tracks down the unusual suspects who made it possible. Peter Falk, Stephen Bochco, Jonathan Demme, Bill Link and Robert Vaughn in Just One More Thing, Columbo.
Some instinct told me that Columbo was just like everybody else. And he was this commonplace man in this old raincoat, but with one exception. He was the best homicide cop on the planet.
Mr. Peter Falk, and he certainly was. And he did it on the streets of Los Angeles without a gun, without chasing anyone in a car, and with a wife that you never saw. Never. From the first series in 1971, I and millions of others around the world have been captivated by Lieutenant Columbo, a cop who looked like a bum, but who had a mind like a steel trap, pitting his considerable wits against a series of villains played by the leading actors of their day, who you knew had committed the murder from the very beginning. So who were the people who revolutionised the whodunit, turning it into the how's he going to catch 'em, and still enthralling viewers in over 200 countries around the world? Oh, hang on, I better get that.
My name is Lieutenant Columbo, homicide. I was listening to your program on my car radio.
Oh, what do you think so far?
I'm a fan of yours, a really big fan. May I ask you something? There's one professional to another. Writers fascinate me. I don't know how you do it. Where do they get their ideas? That fascinates me. Where do you get your ideas?
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because as an aspiring crime writer, I got a lot of ideas from watching you, Lieutenant. Actually, we've got someone here who might have one or two surprises about exactly where you came from. The man who, along with his college buddy Dick Levinson, created the show, Bill Link.
Dick and I read Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, the great classic, and we were both enthralled with the bureaucratic detective in that book who quizzes the murderer, the young student. His name was Porfiry Petrovich, and he had much of the style that we used for Columbo.
Damn, I've got confused, Porfiry said, clapping his hand to his forehead. The devil take it, this case is too much for my poor brain. He went on, turning to Raskolnikov, almost as if in apology.
You'll see how he keeps telling the student he's not that bright, he's not educated like the student. He's got a lot of the Columbo tricks.
I'm making a pest of myself. No. Yes, I am. I know it's because I keep asking these questions, but I'll tell you, I can't help myself. It's a habit.
We also were influenced by the Father Brown stories by G.K. Chesterton, who was a favorite of ours, and some of the humbleness of the character came from Father Brown.
Father Brown buttoned up his commonplace overcoat to the neck, for the night was stormy. Yes, he said, it must be very hard work to be a gentleman. But do you know, I have sometimes thought that it may be almost as laborious to be a waiter.
Ah, you see? You never know, do you?
Back when Universal wanted a name to play Columbo, Dick and I came up with Bing Crosby. I don't remember why. Maybe it's because Crosby always had the pipe, so we substituted, the cigar. At times we got delusional.
That's true. The first Columbo was Bing Crosby. That's who they wanted. And there is a reason that I enjoy the game of golf. And that reason is that Bing Crosby said no to playing Columbo because he had a golf tournament. So if it wasn't for golf, I would never be Columbo. Bing Crosby as Columbo, he could have been terrific. We'll never know.
Peter was an old friend of ours from New York. When Peter was getting started in television back in the late 50s, and occasionally we used to have breakfast with Peter because we really liked him. I don't believe he was on our list. We hadn't thought of him. And out of the blue, we got a phone call in our office at Universal, and it was Peter. And he said, I just read this new script of yours, and I'll kill to play that cop.
Peter Falk had already been nominated twice for Oscars, but now, having been cast in Columbo, he had to make one of the most iconic decisions in television history. What on earth should his character wear?
There was this room, and there was a bed in it, and they had laid out all the various things for Columbo to wear: black suits, gray suits, light brown suits, different shirts. And they even have, this is hard to believe, they even had a driving coat. He had a special coat that he wore when he drove his car. So, I mean, when I saw that wardrobe, I said, this could be worn by anybody. Great characters on TV are characters that you remember what they wore. Well, not only in TV, everybody remembers what Charlie Chaplin wore. So when it came to Columbo's costume, for some reason my raincoat popped into my mind. That was my personal coat. I bought that coat 5 or 6 years before Columbo was ever started.
Why, Lieutenant, are you considering a change of wardrobe?
Oh, no. Oh, every once in a while I think about getting a new coat, but there's no rush on that, sir. There's still a lot of wear in this fella.
Where's the raincoat now?
People say that it's in the Smithsonian. That's the famous museum in Washington, D.C. And my answer to that is, if the Smithsonian is my bedroom closet on the second floor of my house, then it's in the Smithsonian.
The Columbo format, which was unique to the viewing audience when Columbo started, was really the inverted mystery form.
There is a murder, but in 5 minutes, you not only know who did it, you know how he did it. So why do people wait for another 2 hours for the end of the show?
This was a gambit invented by a British novelist, R. Austin Freeman, who wrote around the turn of the century and a little later. And Dick and I, because we were mystery fans, we knew his work.
Would it be possible to write a detective story in which from the outset the reader was taken entirely into the author's confidence, was made an actual witness of the crime, and furnished with every fact that could possibly be used in its detection? Would there be any story left when the reader had all the facts?
I kind of knew it right from the start. There's a lot of little things. Little things.
The problem with the inverted form, and the problem that gave us and other writers, headaches and heartaches for the length of the series, was the fact that you paint yourself into a corner. You see the perfect alibi. Now, how is Columbo going to explode that alibi? There are clues dropped throughout, but you're always coming to that ending where you need the big clue, which Peter Falk calls the pop.
That's it, the pop twist. And it was murder coming up with that final clue, the final pop. They were very hard to come by. And that automatically limited the number that you could make. You could never make a Columbo every week. It was impossible. It was tough enough making a Columbo one a month.
You did not look closely enough at that typewriter. If you had, you would have seen that it used a plastic carbon ribbon.
And I thought I'd perform the perfect murder.
Perfect murder, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. There is no such thing as a perfect murder. That's just an illusion. Officer.
To help them, Levinson and Link took on a fledgling young writer who would later go on to create programs such as Hill Street Blues, LA Law and NYPD Blue. But Columbo is where it all started for Stephen Bochco.
You know, I was just a kid in a tiny cubbyhole across the hall from Bill and Dick. They couldn't have been more opposite. They were sort of like Mutt and Jeff. You know, Dick was this tall, very nervous, twitchy guy, you know, who couldn't sit still. And he was the one who always manned the typewriter. And Bill, Link, would just sort of, you know, sit in an easy chair and puff away on a cigar and, and just kind of throw in little thoughts and one-liners here and there. And they would summon me, and they'd say, okay, we have an idea for this episode, and here's the idea. And I would deliver them a first draft, and then they'd give me notes very quickly, and I'd go off and do a second draft. And then they would take my script and rewrite it. They taught me.
You've learned very well, Lieutenant.
Thank you, sir. That's the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me.
I had always known that Bill and Dick used Crime and Punishment as a sort of a broad template for the Columbo show. Well, for me, as a writer, it wasn't Crime and Punishment. It wasn't Dostoevsky. It was Levinson and Link. It was Columbo.
The launch season of Columbo, which Dick and I produced, was murderous. We had no scripts. We started from scratch, and these scripts were the hardest ones at that time of any to write on American television, because there were only two people circling each other with all the clues, with the big pop, with all the character writing, the humor, and we had to do it all. We had to jam it in that summer. So it was literally migraine country all the way.
One of the things that complicated that first year tremendously was that they were endlessly at war with Peter Falk. And I love Peter. I still love him. I see Peter all the time. But he and Bill and Dick just went at it every day. And they would just have these terrible rows. I could hear them across the hall. And then when it was done, Peter'd poke his head into my office and say, hey, how you doing? How you doing, kid? And, how's it going? And, I loved your script. And, I mean, he was, it was sort of like Jekyll and Hyde.
Oh, one more thing before I forget.
In the history of television, I was the only star of a television show that was barred from coming onto the lot before the show ever went on the air. We were writing the scripts, and they said, you're not permitted on the lot. Bill Lincoln and Dick Levinson, they were busy writing these scripts, and I was taking up all their time wanting to make corrections on what had been written so far. And they went to the studio and said, we can't get anything done. This guy never leaves us alone.
Columbo, I'm going to throw you out of here on your ear.
I wouldn't do that, sir. I mean, you'll miss the best part. You see, I'm not finished.
And then Peter, for the fourth show, we had 3 in the can, decided he wanted to direct.
Oh, yeah, that was another thing, right. I said, hey, I want to direct one of these.
Well, the Black Tower, that's where the power people are at Universal. They went crazy.
And Bill and Dick and the studio, they said, well, you never directed before. And I said, yeah, but I want to start. And their answer was, he wants to start, he wants to learn on our time, let him go and learn on somebody else's time. Then I developed headaches, and I couldn't come out of my trailer. I said, no, my head is killing me. So in order to cure my headaches, they agreed to allow me to direct the show.
Columbo, you are magnificent. You really are.
What makes you say that, Doc?
You're the most persistent creature I've ever met, but likable. The astonishing thing is you're likable. I respect that. It irritates me, but I respect it.
Creative tension and a lot of headaches led to spectacular results, with the show winning just about every television award going in its first series, and Falk winning the first of what would be 4 Emmy Awards for his portrayal of Columbo. After this, Levinson and Link became consultative godfathers to the show, positions they would hold until the untimely death of Dick Levinson in 1987. But for many years, Falk had been the real power. As such, in 1978, he'd been able to bring in a director still suffering from his first feature film failure. Jonathan Demme would later go on to make Oscar-winning movies Silence of the Lambs and Philadelphia. But what did Columbo mean to him?
It was a chance to work with Peter Falk. You just can't underplay the enormity of that. Literally one of the finest actors of the 20th century, and you get to go play with him for a week or two.
I may be wrong, but I should imagine that TV at that time was quite kind of buttoned up. There were certain ways of doing things and so on. Was Columbo a show that allowed you to kind of break any rules, do you think?
Well, Columbo functioned really in a way that, best I could tell, was completely removed from the normal way of producing television shows. In fact, I know it was, and I was sort of shocked and confused by it because I quickly discovered that Peter Falk did not memorize his lines before the filming. He memorized his lines before shooting scene by scene.
Oh, I would try that, yes. I did that a lot of times with Columbo. I wouldn't study them in advance. I go there and I didn't know them. And it helped. It makes a big difference. I mean, it's just common sense. If you practice it alone at home, you already know how you're going to say it. But if you don't practice it and you just do it spontaneously and you hear your cue for the first time, and then it comes out of your mouth, it does sound fresh.
It just astonished me. I'd never seen anything like it before. You wouldn't be allowed to do this in the feature film world.
Why do you think he worked that way? Did he want to create a kind of spontaneity on the set?
You know what? I think I can't speak for Peter, and it's not even appropriate for me to even hazard a guess, but strikes me as if you can get that kind of ecology to work in, why not?
The show's unique improvisatory quality led to one of the most fortuitous bits of musical ad-libbing in TV history. Can you hum the Columbo theme tune? No? Well, it did have one, just not officially. I think you made that up too, didn't you, Mr. Falk?
That's exactly right. By gosh, you got it right. We were in a nondescript basement somewhere, and I was talking on the telephone. I called the Weather Bureau, and I wanted to know what were the weather conditions the previous Tuesday.
I'll hold.
And the guy said, wait a minute, I have to look that up. And I was standing there with the phone to my ear and the camera, maybe, who knows, 18 inches away, pointing directly in my face. And I had to wait, because I actually called the Weather Bureau. It wasn't another actor. And I had to wait for the weatherman to come back with that information.
No, that's tomorrow's weather. I want information concerning last week's weather.
But I was very much aware of the fact that there was a camera pointing at me and it was filming me. And I thought, this isn't very interesting for the audience. What are they going to do? Just sit there and look at my face while I wait for the weatherman to come back with the information? So out of self-consciousness, I started to hum. Bum, 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 ba-dum, bum, 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 bum. And then I said, that's not going to hold their attention. You better put the words to it. So I started humming and then singing. This old man, he played one, he played knick-knack, and that's how that song originated. That's where it came from. And then it caught on, and people loved it, and I loved it, and it was part of every show.
So, a combination of intelligent scripts and Peter Falk's genius for improvisation was part of the show's alchemy. But what other ingredients does Jonathan Demme think are part of Columbo's secret formula?
One of the keys to the great success of Columbo was that it dared to imagine that the audience was very bright and enjoyed seeing these stories unfold.
And the structure, presumably, is a great gift for a filmmaker. The fact that the audience had access to the murderer, a voyeuristic element to it, that the audience is in on it.
Certainly, it's great. And also, I like very much that it makes the viewer complicit with the murderer. And each one, I think, tries to make, we might as well call them a villain, as formidable and indeed as charming and seductive as possible, so that even as we want to see Columbo succeed, he's up against someone who is both so bright and so charming that we view their final downfall with mixed, complicated emotions.
The roles that I'm most remembered by in terms of the public are the charming villain.
A charming villain on the show not once, but twice. Screen legend Robert Vaughn.
Of course, Columbo is the best example of the charming villain who gets his comeuppance in the end.
Oh, why do you keep suggesting that my father-in-law's disappearance was something more than an accident?
Oh, just a couple little things bother me.
Basically, I've always felt that unless you're playing a historical character who the audience knows a great deal about, all villains don't consider themselves villains. Even Stalin and Hitler didn't consider themselves villains. So you must approach a villain from that point of view. The way they look at life, they are in the right and everybody else is in the wrong.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that. Well, that must explain that.
Well, the odd thing about Peter was you wouldn't know when he was starting to do Columbo and when he was being Peter, because he'd engage you in a conversation on the set where the scene was going to take place.
You're a stickler for details, Lieutenant. Look, I hope I'm not boring you with all this, but it helps to talk it out. Not at all, no.
Then they would light the set of the scene, and then he'd kind of re-engage you in a conversation, a normal conversation, like Robert talking to Peter, and somehow you kind of segue into the Columbo scene, and you never knew what moment he was going to change, because in effect he really didn't change. I mean, Peter was very much playing himself as Columbo, or a variation on his own personality. So he was remarkable to work with. I mean, I've never worked with another actor who quite had this ability to meld his own personality in the same sentence sometimes and go into the character of Columbo. He was wonderful.
Well, I admire your taste.
Right, so we know they were charming. But what else did these villains have in common? Columbo's creator, Bill Link.
We always had wealthy murderers, and it's like the working class man going against the murdering capitalist. I mean, that seemed to work, I guess, all over the world, because average people, working people, identified with Columbo. Most people think they're smarter than they're given credit for. And here's Columbo, who everybody thinks is dumb, especially the wily murderer. And we know he's got a mind like a computer.
The fun was that the mouse was the cat.
Stephen Bochco.
You know, as I've thought about Columbo over the years, I think the ultimate key to the success of that concept and to the longevity of the show, as embodied by Peter, was that at its core, it really wasn't about a cop or a detective. In its bigger template, it was about class warfare. The brilliance of Columbo was that nobody ever said that. One of the great lessons you learn as a writer is that if you have to say it, you're not telling your story.
What do you make of all this, Lieutenant?
Nothing conclusive, sir. But maybe the prevailing theory is wrong.
So, what does the man himself make of the writer's prevailing theory? Was class war at the heart of Columbo?
No. No.
Oh, so you and Bochco disagree about that then?
Yes, we do disagree, because Columbo never had any personal antagonism to the people that he was chasing. Some he liked, some he enjoyed, others he didn't like. But he never thought in terms of class. I'm poor, or I'm a street guy, or anything like that. No, he was interested in people.
And I guess that curiosity that you talk about, the fact that Columbo's interested in these people, is what ultimately makes him such a great detective.
Yes. He was not burdened by making an impression on people. You and I, we want other people to think we're terrific. That's what we want. But Columbo is not burdened by that.
And what about you, Lieutenant? Beneath that ruffled exterior, there ticks away the heart of an empiricist philosopher, probing for the truth at all costs.
I'm just doing my job.
You make it sound so proletarian.
You see, the reason that I enjoyed Columbo was because he could be funny. He could be funny, and sometimes he didn't even know he was funny. But when he went around and asking people, excuse me, do you have a spare pencil? You know?
Gee, you don't have a pencil, do you? Thanks. You know, my wife, she gives me one every morning, and I just can't seem to hold on to it.
That was fun to play. So his forgetfulness was funny.
My most vivid memory of it is that I knew I was working on something that was magically good, whose sum was greater than its parts, and its parts were pretty darn good. You know, it didn't get better than Peter Falk or Dick Levinson and Bill Link.
And Bochco, Stephen Bochco and Jonathan Demme and Lincoln Levinson, all these people, my God, they were great, just great.
It becomes, while you're not really thinking about it, a cultural touchstone.
I recently filmed a documentary with former President Jimmy Carter. It always tickled me. Carter would say, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm doing a documentary. It's being directed by this man, Mr. Demme, who is the director of Columbo." He knew the episode, knew it well, remembered many, many moments from the episode. And I thought, fantastic, 30 years later or something, my Columbo bought me entree to do the Jimmy Carter documentary.
So Oscars count for nothing, the kudos is Columbo.
That's it.
And it's all the more remarkable when you realize that probably over the 30-plus years that Columbos have been produced, the total number of Columbos produced probably wouldn't equal 2 seasons of a normal television series. And yet, it endures today as one of the truly great achievements in the history of American television. I guess that goes to prove that less really is more.
I don't think there's any great mystique about it. Great character, great actor, fabulous scripts. Kind of perfect, isn't it?
It certainly is. But of course, we wouldn't be Columbo fans if we hadn't saved up our own secret pop. We never get to meet the famous Mrs. Columbo, but that doesn't mean Mrs. Falk didn't show up from time to time.
Would you say this looks like me, Lieutenant?
That's it, the pop twist.
I'd say it doesn't do you justice.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
Where are you going? I'm meeting my wife at the yacht club.
My real wife was in a couple of episodes. She's very beautiful. And she's very funny. And I'm very lucky.
And so was I, along with millions of viewers all over the world, in having Columbo around to tie up loose ends and catch all manner of killers who weren't quite clever enough for over 30 years. Oh, I knew I'd forgotten something. Lieutenant, you never did tell me what your first name was.
Just one more thing, Mr. Billingham. Mr. McHugh. The end.
Just One More Thing, Columbo was presented by Mark Billingham and produced by Peter McHugh.